this episode, I wanted to focus on anchors, how to properly anchor your windmill and tower. For this episode, we will focus primarily on 6 and 8 foot air motor windmills and how anchors pertain to them. Now, you might have a different brand or a different size of windmill or tower, and this will generally work for your windmill also. But I'm going to stay focused specifically on air motor recommendations for their windmills and towers, and some new techniques that we've used since we've been installing towers for about 16 years now. How we do it and what works for us and what we found that doesn't work. So, what is an anchor? An anchor is simply an extension of the windmill tower. It's roughly 5 foot long, has a foot at the bottom. It bolts the tower like the rest of the tower bolts together, and that extension then goes into the ground roughly 4 feet, and that's what anchors it securely to the ground, with the intent of keeping the windmill tower and windmill from blowing over. So behind me here I have an anchor for a 6 and 8 foot air motor windmill. As you can see at the top, it's got 4 holes, and that's where it would bolt to the bottom of the tower. And at the bottom of the anchor, it simply has a foot. And this foot helps it keep from sinking into the ground and pulling out. Well, how do you properly anchor an anchor into the ground? So talking about these anchors, what I'm going to focus on is if we were installing the windmill using a crane, which is the fastest, easiest, and safest method to install a tower. There's other ways of doing it. We'll get to those in future episodes. But for this episode, I want to strictly talk about installing it using a crane. Air Motor provides diagrams on where to dig the holes for each different size tower. And you lay those out on the ground. Once you have your holes laid out, then you dig them. I always like to dig a 4 foot deep hole, 12 inches in diameter. So before you dig, I do recommend that you call whatever local company you can call to make sure you're not digging into any underground power lines, telephone lines, all that stuff. I say that from experience. I've cut my own telephone line installing a windmill for myself. So now we're going to install the tower and the anchors. We're going to lift the tower up with a crane and dangle it over our 4 holes. Once we've done that, we can put our 4 anchors loosely in the 4 holes that we have dug and bolt them on to that. Then it's a good idea to have the crane operator set the tower down in the holes as far as it will go so that your anchors are touching the bottom of the holes. And hopefully it's touching on all 4. If it's not, it's okay. We can work around that. Once you and the crane operator are sure that the tower's plumb, then what I like to do is mix up this fast setting cement. It comes in a red bag. It's about 60 pounds per bag. It sets up a lot faster. It sets up in about an hour. I actually like to use just 1 sack per hole. And so we mix up that cement and pour it down into the hole. That cement will then form a concrete ball, a concrete glob around the bottom of that anchor. And it's only filling in the bottom of the hole, maybe 6 to 8 inches. But it is attaching itself to the base of that anchor. Once I've done that to all 4 anchors and it has set up, then we backfill the holes with the existing soil. So I want to talk about this process in a little bit more detail. We have dug our holes 4 feet deep and 12 inches in diameter. It's also a good idea to bell the bottom of the hole out a little bit so that when that concrete sits in there, it forms sort of a bell shape in the bottom of the hole. We've pulled the soil out of the hole and it is now sitting at the top of the ground in piles nearby. Our crane operator has lifted the tower up and it is hanging over our 4 holes. And we loosely place the 4 anchors into the holes we've dug and then bolt them to the tower. The crane operator gets the tower plumb. And as we talked about, occasionally 1 or more of the anchors could be sitting off the bottom of the hole. And that's okay because when we mix up our cement and pour it in, that cement is going to form that concrete blob around the bottom of the anchor. And that blob will fit between the bottom of the anchor and the bottom of the hole and fill in that gap, making it a stable anchor. Then we take the soil that we dug out, put it in, and tamp it in. And now we have finished setting our anchor. Windmill and tower are now anchored. Somebody can climb up, unhook the crane from the windmill, add the oil to the windmill, or install your windmill on top at that point, and you're done with your anchors. This is the first windmill that I ever anchored, and I would not recommend doing it this way. We put a cardboard sonic tube around the anchor and filled it with concrete. The problem with doing it this way is that it creates a slick surface for that concrete and the dirt where they come together. And the concrete actually floats in the dirt, moving up and down. While it's very slight, it is not truly anchored in the ground the way that we've just discussed doing it. Where that concrete blob is on the bottom of the anchor and then has the existing soil packed on top of it, that keeps that anchor from floating up and down as much as in this case, the slick surface and the dirt, there's really nothing to grab onto it, and it's just friction that's holding this anchor in the ground. Now, in the wintertime, we get winds from the north and from the south, typically in the summertime, and I can see these anchors shift slightly from season to season when the ground dries out and also when it gets wet. It's not a huge difference, but it is enough to be noticeable. So after discussing how to anchor towers with many people who've been doing this in the business and reading older literature, is how I came up with the way that we've talked about today. I hope you've enjoyed this episode talking about windmill anchors. If you have any other questions regarding windmills, towers, any of that, please let me know. I'd like to answer questions if I can for you. Thanks, and I'll see you all on the next Windmilling Wednesday.